All right guys, so I went and got me, this is a piece of wire, just copper wire. I think this is, figure it out, I think it's a 12 gauge wire. And I've stripped all the insulation off except for one end, and I made this hook. You could use something like a drill bit or something, but the reason I don't is because if you drop it in that hole, in that nipple hole, it goes into your intake and you will have to lift the intake off to get it out. So I'm using this piece of wire with a little hook on the end. That way, if it does slip out of my hands, it's not going to fall all the way into the intake and I don't have to rip all this stuff off. So make sure whatever you're using has a way to not fall in there. So what we're going to do is I'm going to stick this in that hole and I'm going to push it through. Oh, yep. And we're going to push it through and try to free up this hole. It feels like it's got some soot built up in it, so this may be the issue, but we'll still go over the rest if so. All right guys, so as you can see, maybe you don't know, but we got our wire in there and I pushed it down and it stopped me, and I had to give it a good little push and it finally went through. And like I said, now I can move it up and down very nicely, all the way until I get to my curve point. And I'll show you, like I said, it's pretty long. Like I said, it'll go down in there. So I'm thinking that may have been our problem. I'm not certain yet, but based on the initial description, I'll explain to you guys. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this hose back on for a second. We're gonna crank the truck up and I'm gonna see if we have any change to how our boost is reading and how the truck's running. And if it's fixed, then I'm gonna actually take that fitting out of the intake and I'm gonna give it a proper clean, get all the soot out of it, and get it really nice and spit shined before I put it back on. But I'm also still gonna go over you guys with other problems that it could be if this is the fix, but we'll see here in just a second. Alrighty guys, so we're inside the truck. We still have our check engine light. I cleared it, it has come back. Our our turbo boost gauge is still not on the zero at idle. Truck is running. We still have smoke coming out of the back. Still not running right. So I don't think we have the issue fixed. So we're gonna move on to the next step. All right guys, so we come back under the hood and I cleaned out my port down here on the intake a little bit more. I removed the hose, made sure there was no damage to it or anything, which like I said, it's getting boost, so I didn't think it would be, but I also blew some air through this hose to make sure there was no sort of stoppage in this hose. And then check the sensor nipple to make sure there was no soot or anything on this end. So we have all that done. So we're gonna move on. We're not gonna mess with the sensor to make sure the sensor yet. We're gonna move on to some of these other areas that I like to check. So another area I like to check is if the EGR is still on the vehicle, which this one still has the EGR valve and cooler on it. So if this valve is very sooted up and gets stuck open or anything like that, it can cause an issue. It'll usually throw its own codes, but I do also like to yank this EGR valve out and make sure it's not gunked up with a lot of soot, because it could cause a loss of boost. But the second area I like to look at, you guys won't be able to see because it's buried. Over here is going to be your exhaust back pressure sensor. So that'll kind of be the same as your map sensor, because it'll have a metal tube that goes to the exhaust manifold, and it'll come up to probably the side of the valve cover. Some of them come up in this area here, but you'll want to pull that metal tube and that sensor and clean it up, because it's probably going to have soot on it and it could be stopped up, which could also cause issues. So we're going to go ahead and try to get to it and get that off and make sure it's not stopped up with soot too. Not sure if you guys can really see, but you'll see right there, there's a tube that goes into your exhaust manifold, and if you follow it, it comes up and it mounts right there to a bracket on the side of the valve cover, and your sensor is right there on this truck. Some of them, the tube may go the other way and it may route up and come out in this vicinity, but this one comes out right here. So we're going to try to get that broke loose off of the manifold and pull that tube out, and we're going to see what it looks like. All right, guys, so I have the other two items I was speaking of. So we have the EGR valve here removed off of the truck. All it is 2 8mm, and it comes out. Sometimes you have to use a pry bar, kind of catch this to help lift it up, because these O-rings will hold on pretty good. But if you guys look at this EGR valve here, you can see it's black and sooted up, which it should be. It's running diesel exhaust through it, so that's fine, but there's no gunk or anything on this. It's not built up. The valve itself is closed. There's no soot or anything holding it open, and it looks fairly clean, so I don't see any issue there. Here is our EBP sensor, exhaust back pressure sensor here. The sensor looks like someone's replaced it, which he did say he put a new engine in. Here's our tube. I already have this broken loose, which is where our sensor is, so it's not going to come out this easy for you guys, but I'd already broke it loose off camera. So I'm going to spin this out, and what we're going to do is we're going to look inside this sensor hole, and we're going to make sure that this is not full of soot or stopped up or anything. And the other common thing is going to be this tube here. So you're going to want to make sure that this tube, not sure if you guys can see, but it's got a lot of soot buildup right here on the end. We want to make sure that this tube is not stopped up anywhere, because if it's stopped up, it'll cause issues. So we're going to get this tube cleaned out and get all this put back on, and then we're going to see if anything changes. If not, then that will kind of conclude just your at-home checks before you really need to, pull out a scan tool and start testing some of this stuff. So like I said, clean out this tube, make sure this sensor's not stopped up, make sure this is not, which this is fine, so I'm gonna just put this one back on, and then we'll see what happens. All right, guys, and another quick little tip, when you have this hose off or this tube, make sure you clean this up with some WD-40 and stuff, and get this fitting turning nicely. A lot of times, I mean, they're going to be rusted up, and like this one, when it come off, I had to turn it every ounce into the last thread. So get you some WD-40, get it sprayed in there, and get this freed up. That way you can, when you go back on, you can actually spin it by hand all the way down until it's just snug, and then all you'll have to do with the wrench is tighten it, because it is kind of a hard spot to get to on the truck. So you don't want to be wrenching all the way on there. You want to have it to where you can tighten it up with your fingers until it's snug, and then just do the torquing, as the final step. You don't want to have to, sit there and turn this wrench, because it took me a good 10 minutes of turning this wrench, a quarter at a time to get this tube off. So just a little quick tip. One little quick tip, guys. The fitting that's on the exhaust manifold where your EBP tube connects to, make sure before you put that back in that you do the same thing you did for the nipple over there. Get you a little wire or something, and make sure that you're not stopped up on that fitting. Stick it through the fitting. That one's a little bit bigger than the one for the map, but just make sure that that's not stopped up with soot. So stick something through it, make sure that you have full travel through before you stick the EBP back in, the tube and the sensor. So just another quick tip.